Welcome back to Close Up. Let's jump right back into things with Senator Maggie Hassan, who's joining us via Zoom from Washington this morning due to weather and travel delays. So, Senator, you already have a connection to Brown University as an alum. That community struck by tragedy in a mass shooting. Now the manhunt ends in New Hampshire. As a graduate of Brown, what are you hearing from the people you know there about how this has affected the campus community?
Oh, look, people are so saddened by what happened. They are thinking of the victims, the students, their families, and everybody who was affected, which is really the entire Brown community and the surrounding area in Providence. So many alums still live in Providence. So many people have been affected by this tragedy. I am thinking of them. I am thinking of the entire Brown community, which has been described to me as just very sad, and until the shooter was discovered, really on edge for understandable reasons. There's a lot more we need to do in this country to make sure people who shouldn't have guns can't get them. And that's one of the things I'm committed to continuing to work on.
Before we discuss the gun control policy, the suspect's immigration status prompted President Trump to attempt to pause a diversity lottery visa program. This program issues about 50,000 visas a year to people from countries that don't see a lot of immigration to the United States. This program, do you consider it a national security threat?
Look, I think it is really important anytime a tragedy like this happens, violence breaks out like this, anytime we can look at what happened and why, and work to figure out whether the systems we're using, whether it's an immigration policy or some sort of other program, could be improved. I think it's important to do that, to evaluate any security risks. But I also just want to make sure that the Trump administration, Secretary Noem, are not using this tragedy as an excuse to paint all immigrants with a broad brush here. They are obviously taking massive and unprecedented action right now against entire communities of immigrants in this country. They are not following due process and the rule of law as they do. And while I think it's important to evaluate the program that allowed the shooter to get permanent status in this country, I think that has to be a really careful analysis, and again, shouldn't be an excuse for unlawful behavior by the administration.
As you noted previously, any mass shooting revives the discussion around guns and gun policy. We also saw a mass shooting in Australia that very clearly targeted the Jewish community there. The gun control debate is in stalemate. You have something called the Pray Safe Act that attempts to head off some of the religiously motivated violence, and it has bipartisan support. You reintroduced it earlier this year in September, I believe, but it still hasn't been able to get over the hump there up to the president's desk. What is the holdup with this particular bill?
So, look, first of all, sadly, anti-Semitism is a continuing form of hatred that is disproportionate around the globe. And I am thinking of the Jewish community in New Hampshire and around the globe as we mourn the lives lost on Bondi Beach. As far as gun safety goes, in 2022, we passed an important gun safety measure that expanded background checks, made the use of red flag laws more available, and importantly, invested in mental health treatment and prevention, especially within our schools. The Trump administration has been working to pull some of that funding, especially around the mental health investments back, and I hope that they will take a moment to consider how important it is that we continue to fund the investments that were authorized in that law back in 2022, so our communities can do the work to help keep us safe. The Pray Safe Act is part of a couple of different bills that I have done. One was to make sure that houses of worship around the country can get critical grant funding to harden their security. And the Pray Safe Act that you're talking about would make a clearinghouse of best practices available to houses of worship and not-for-profits so that they could develop in a straightforward way with online assistance more expertise in keeping their churches, their synagogues their institutions safe. There has been a holdup because of a couple of provisions in the bill. We're trying to work those through. I'm glad that we have bipartisan support for it. There should be no place for anti-Semitism anywhere in the world. But as we deal with these ongoing threats, it's really important to give our houses of worship and our nonprofits the tools they need to keep safe so that people can worship in the way that makes them feel comfortable, in the way that is meaningful to them, and know that they're safe as they do.
I want to get to a few other top issues here, so we're going to bounce around a bit. You know, there's been some reporting that the Trump administration is not going to fully comply with the bill overwhelmingly passed by the House and Senate to release the Epstein files. It's going to be an incomplete release at the end of the day on Friday. Do you think there should be legal consequences for not fully complying with the law?
Let's be really clear. First and foremost, the importance about these files is the transparency and information they will provide about what happened to these young people, girls who were sex trafficked by an elite group of people, the Epstein class. And I think a lot about the victims and the survivors here. I think about honoring their wishes, about making sure that nothing like this happens to vulnerable girls in the future. And if people haven't read Virginia Giuffre's book, which is a painful and difficult book to read, but an important one, I really recommend that they do, because ultimately this is about the pain and suffering that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and others inflicted on these young people, and it should never, ever happen. This is also, by the way, an example of yet another promise that Donald Trump made during his campaign that he is refusing to keep.
The president is moving all kinds of military firepower into the Caribbean, guns trained on Venezuela. He's been touting himself as this peacemaking president, so it's a little odd that we're seeing this move towards a potential regime change conflict in Venezuela. Do you believe we are actually on the precipice of war in South America?
Well, look, what I know is Granite Staters and Americans don't want to be dragged into another war. And while the administration gives various rationales for what they're doing off the coast of Venezuela and the threats they're making against Venezuela, they need to be far more transparent with members of Congress, because in this instance, we really are the people's representatives in terms of getting this information and understanding why the administration is taking the steps it is. Now, the president talks about this being part of a fight against drug trafficking. We all know so well and so desperately in New Hampshire what fentanyl has done to our communities. But the administration is targeting cocaine trafficking. And at the same time that they're saying this is part of the fight against the war on drugs, they have pardoned the president of Honduras, who is a convicted drug trafficker. And they are cutting critical resources through the Medicaid program for addiction treatment, which helps reduce the demand for illicit drugs in New Hampshire and all across the country. So it is hard to understand what the rationale is. They need to be much more transparent, and we cannot be dragged into another endless war.
This is a quote from the president. Quote, "They took our oil rights. We want it back." Is that a justifiable reason to go to war?
If that is the president's rationale, he needs to come to Congress. He needs to explain his rationale. We need to have a full debate about what he means by those words. And then we need to see if Congress will authorize the use of force or make a declaration of war. So far, they have not provided any rationale to that point.
All right, Senator Maggie Hassan, thank you for joining us from Washington, and safe travels getting home to the Granite State. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy holidays.
Likewise. And we'll be right back with New Hampshire's child advocate, Cassandra Sanchez. Stay with us.